everyone. It is a delight to be speaking with you, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got to share. My name is Norah Jones, and I am an educator by background of French, Spanish, Russian, Latin when I can get to it, and a daughter of an immigrant father from Croatia. It has played tremendously into my life to be sensitive to the idea that language and culture changes lives. And as an educator, I certainly have been taking a look at how we learn languages and how we learn cultures in a way that really provides us for power. So it's my pleasure to have you here today. Looking forward, again, as I say, to your sharing. And we can put the screen up now, if you would please, our dear administrator. Taking a look at the Level Up for Game Changer Language Insights. And here's my point, my dear friends, that I am excited to be able to say that when we understand the nature of language, how language works, then we get a chance to be able to work with language better. So I'm looking at what is it that you've already found out about language that you're working with? What is it that you discover today? And how then, when you step back, can you step forward? We're going to be taking a look at 4 truths, 3 steps, 3 gifts. I like counting and stuff like that. But the idea is that through backing up, looking at these items that underlay everything we work with, that we end up with increasing impact of language and culture studies in our lives and joy. So let's get to it. Looking forward to seeing what you can share. First of all, let's start with the 4 language truths that I'd like to share with you today. Again, back up so that you can think about is how do you learn? How do you, if you are a teacher, how do you teach? And if you're here as an administrator, how can you help to support the language learning that's going on in your school or schools because of these truths? Okay, so here we go. But we start with you. Now you can use this in the comment box, okay? I want to see what you're up to. Let me know. There's a quick quiz, all right? So I'm looking for you to provide an answer. This is a little bit of a quiz. So here's your first one. Ready? Are you ready? Okay, ready to write the answers. Language has been spoken for, fill in the blank, years. Go ahead and write it in. Let's see what you got. Language has been spoken for how long do you think? Think carefully. I'm going to do a little humming. Do 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 dum dum dum. I didn't do the Jeopardy hum. I should have. Okay. Language has been spoken for, well, 150,000 years. We know that humans have been using language then to get each other's attention, protect each other, for 150,000 years. And I see some guesses, and that's really neat because I see underguessing, but you see it's been around for a tremendously long time. Well understood. Nobody put millions of years here, so that's okay too. 150,000. Most linguists agree. All right. Okay, now here's another question. You ready? Language has been written for blank number of years. Okay, think about that. We know that language has been spoken for approximately 150,000 years, according to the best linguists. How about written? Well, let's see what you guessed, because the answer is yes, very close. Very good, guys. 6,000. Again, some linguists will have themselves gigantic fistfights over this, but actually, the proportionality is where I'm going with here. Do you see how we have been speaking language for significantly longer than we've been writing it? So, what's that truth then going to do? Let's take a look. Yes, congratulations to those of you that came right on the money or very close to it. Here's a first item about language. When we sign up for language, or if you, again, are an administrator or a teacher, you know that sometimes students sign up language. We all have this tendency to feel like we are in for, and we are, by the way, for an exciting adventure. It's going to feel very stimulating. We're going to be conquerors of the language and the culture. We, for the most part, we can hardly wait to get started. Okay, we feel heroic when we get going. However, once we get into it, we recognize that language is actually kind of more scary often. We need to understand that we, or potentially one of our classmates, or our students that started out by looking like they were all available and excited, all of a sudden experience it as a potentially a drop off a major waterfall, something that kind of takes your breath away, drowns you at the bottom, that you have to try to figure out how to get out from underneath. So the first thing is to recognize that language is challenging in ways that we may not be prepared for, okay? And to be patient about that. Second is, we often think of language as a solo journey climbing to a peak, and that we will actually reach that peak. That peak will be there and we can conquer it. And when we conquer it, it's all done. Okay. But in fact, what we discover is that language is a more of a slow journey. We go around bends. We can't really see the top or the end or the destination finally. And it's pretty calm for the most part, just floating along. Now, recognize, I think this picture is beautiful too. Moreover, one thing to notice, and we'll chat about it again, is that you're not doing it by yourself. There are a variety of uh, companions traveling with you. All right, here's another thing that we tend to think about language. We tend to think about language as something we discover. Now, this is getting to be a bigger one here, my friends. We tend to think of language as being a part of a repository of facts, information, expressions, vocabulary, and if we study it, we'll discover it, and then we can take the pot and go home. Language is not a discovery. It's an invention. It's an invention. Language is being built every day by the speakers of a language, including you if you're studying it, including you if you are teaching it. Language is being built lexical item by lexical item, that is to say, word by word, vocabulary piece by vocabulary piece, primarily. We put grammar in as mortar to keep the building from falling down ultimately when it gets big enough, but it is being built day by day. It is being created. It may or may not turn out to be a full-fledged house or even beautiful when it's finished, although we're going to give it a try, and you'll notice something else again. It is not being built alone. Language is not a discovery. So if you have material or you have an idea in your mind that you are going to finish learning a language at some point, actually, no. This is going to be an ongoing building you're creating, and you get to create along with every other speaker of this language. That's exciting. Language is alive. It's alive. And when we keep that in mind, both as educators and as students, now we've got an exciting adventure to go on. Today, by the way, you will only understand about 10% of what I'm saying. All the rest of it will actually be lost to you, but you'll get the gist of it. So I have a lot of language so you can pick up some, and that's something to bring hope to your learning. All right, number 4. Yes, we are creating language every time we use it. Very nicely said, Michelle. Number 4, and this is a real biggie, and this one I want you to challenge yourself with. Take it home with you. Hold it tight and think about it a lot as a student, as a teacher, and also as an administrator. We think of language as written. You've already taken the quiz. You've already seen that actually writing is a convention that was established not that long ago. But because we are highly literate people here today, we think of language often as an aspect of literacy, that is to say, written form. We pick up a textbook. We hand people pieces of paper. We begin to read off of things. Well, It can be literate, but there are things to watch out for because language, as we've seen already by the quiz, is primarily an object of the body. Now, the first body piece I'm going to show you here today is about the ear, because I believe that many of the people that are participating today and will continue to participate in this particular wonderful global event are going to be folks that have the ability to hear to at least some extent. And language has strongly been about the body and especially about the ear. And so what I'm challenging you today is to realize that this truth is that language is about the ear. Language is about the way the body works rather than about literacy can really be a breakthrough. So for example, if you are a student and you understand that language is sound, if you step back and listen to it, you're going to have breakthroughs. You're going to have breakthroughs that even sometimes the way that it's instructed to you or that books present it, you can disagree with, okay? And go for it, by the way. For example, one of the workshops I want to give one day is there's no such thing as irregular. Why would people that are dependent on understanding each other by voice make their lives miserable with irregularity? And I don't, well, you know what I mean. Irregular verbs, irregular actions, irregular spellings. They don't do that. What they have is history of the voice. So, for example, if you happen to be studying, say, Spanish, and you recognize that verbal impact on certain vowels splits them, then you understand that contar becomes cuento. It's natural. You don't have to worry about the spelling. If you are in French and they're like, no, no, you must add an E after the C because we have commençons, we have to use a cd. No, no, no. It is about the sound being retained. And you see, when native speakers work with sound, they do things like we know in languages that include, say, subjunctive, where a vowel switch signals whether something is possible or impossible, probable or fact. This switch of sound from present tense to future tense means that when we look and we see there is nothing actually that's irregular, there is nothing that is unpredictable, really, if we know that language is sound and we also recognize that there's a history in words. Sometimes things like, say, the English, for example, I go, you go in the present tense, I went, you went in the past tense, it's not irregular, it's just two different verbs. One was selected for the present tense, one was selected for the past tense, but they're the same background of what they mean. Listening brings that all out, and that truth can change everything. If you are a teacher, okay, be sure to recognize this, to step back and contact me because I have all sorts of tools for that, okay? That's fun. Now, I do want to make sure that I say that, again, language is primarily not written, right? But I also want to make sure that a shout out to those who are participating in American Sign Language or other sign languages around the globe. If the person is not able to hear completely or at all, the body then is the full expression. And one more reason why I think it's very important that we take a look at this is that literacy can be a block to some people to being able to succeed. If that happens to you or to a peer or to one of your students, take a look at how language is sound, language is the body, can change everything. So built together, you create it, you are the creator, and its language is alive. It's a journey. It's going to be scary every once in a while, and you won't always feel as if you are the conqueror, and especially language is sound. All right, so let's take a little bit more about this truth here as we go forward. Remember, I'm going to make a bigger point here about literacy. Remember, only few people were able to read way back when. Therefore, everybody that was talking pretty much was interested in being able to make sense out of sound. Now, when the printing press was developed, and we're glad it was, then literacy became a key part of our lives. However, if we're not careful and sometimes we weren't, we turned then the language into a literacy contest. And it makes sense that we did so because a lot of the learning in the United States, anyway, was about Latin, a language that was no longer spoken. And it became part of the way that we teach now modern languages in the United States. Other cultures and countries around the world, I know, don't have that same particular approach. But whenever we take a look and we're like, are we making it so that it's difficult to understand the patterns of language, the joy of language, how language is a verbal treat, how you know how spellings work because it's a listening? So take a look into that. Because, my friends, and I wonder if this relates to you, you can tell me in the comments. And certainly teachers can take a look at this with great interest, I believe, because literally, if you scan our brains, you will find that our brains react to peer exclusion like it's going to be death-defying. Literally, at the neural level, we perceive social rejection as a threat to existence. When we're in a class or when we're watching students and people say, I feel like I'm going to die, I'd rather die than get up and talk, neurologically, they mean it. Okay. Now, it happens to come from a National Geographic article, this quote, back in 2011 when they had done neurological uh, work with the teenage brain. But the fact is that because language is about our identity, because it's about our community, we do perceive anything that threatens us to be dangerous to our lives. Okay, which is one reason why I keep going to language is sound, to the patience, the creativity, and the risk taking. That's all part of those truths. Okay, so doesn't this child that I'm showing today look a little scary? Yes, indeed, because the first thing that we need to do when we go into a classroom, teachers, that students need to do when they go into the classroom, they need to know they're going to survive. Survive. Comprehensible input is one way of saying helping students to feel like they can begin to understand, but I'm going to make it an even bigger picture. What are we doing in a classroom that allows ourselves, our students, to be able to feel that they're going to survive the class? I don't mean going out of the language. I mean actually staying in the language, but making it so that it is incremental, fun, and about the ear. Because once we know we can survive, even just a little bit, just the first day, then we go to our next stage of what we want to see happen. We want to belong. Language is part of our identity, you know. When you were a kiddo, you cried for your caretaker, hoping that they would feed you. And once you realized that you were likely to be fed, you needed to belong to at least someone in a family unit, some kind of a unit that gave you some identity and belonging. Same thing goes on in class. Once we realize we can survive and not die from that neurological disaster, then we want to make connections with our peers through this language gently and carefully. And only once we have done that connection can we feel comfortable about becoming competent. A lot of times, I speak for myself as a learner for just a moment. I would go into a classroom as someone that had success in other subject areas, let's say, and I expected some success in language, and I got confused quickly, and somebody put something in front of me I couldn't read, and I felt overwhelmed, and I could feel my neurological tension. So first I needed to feel like I could survive and like I could belong in that course with other people. Only then could I discern whether or not I was going to care about whether I conjugated a verb correctly or made a phrase correctly. Because these three parts are part of the basic human need. Survival is the base. I made it bigger letters, more bold. We must survive, then we can belong, then we can become competent. So if we're students, we want to make sure that we take a look at the language truths of it's going to be a little scary, but hang in there and create. Okay, we're going to listen carefully. And educators here, please give everybody a chance to hear and receive and survive, because then you can connect people to belong and they can grow those connections, because that's what language is about, our identity and our community. And only then will we care about being competent. Let's not rush. So the first aspect of the truth, those 4 truths of language, are that we then become competent only if we take these steps and recognize that, again, language is alive and that we are co-creating gently, gently. Okay? All right. So what do you think so far? Do you realize that when you go into a classroom that you have all that you need, because whether you're in a language that's going to be signed or whether you're in a language that's going to be heard and spoken, you have the equipment that you need. There is no one that should be left out. Here's another thing too. When we look at language classes, administrators and educators, please let students in. If these are organized in such a way that the reality of language is a spoken phenomenon, a language is an invention that is ongoing, that communication will never be perfect, that communication is designed to belong, not to be competent. You see, it's 2 separate steps. That if we can organize our courses this way from the very beginning of the first day of the first year and onward, that we have an opportunity to make it accessible to all students. I suspect that every one of us as educators has a story about a young person that had been kept out of a language course. And when they came in, they had an energy and an interest in achieving, and they had to struggle harder because of some of the disabilities that they were working with, the challenges they were working with over the years, but they had that energy. And if we apply the principles of listening, lexical, creation, communication is to make community, then we have everyone is able to belong. We also set the stage where we can say that there are certain literacy levels that people can achieve, and that's wonderful. Congratulations. But that in languages, the literacy levels are not going to drive whether or not you're actually going to be able to make use of this language in your life. It just won't. It's the community that you're building. Okay? This is so important to not feel left out. All right. Those 4 truths are absolute basics. You can see how adamant I feel about them because I feel so many people have been left out. So let's talk about the 3 steps to communication because they're based on what we've just experienced. The 3 steps to communication. I'm a bear of very little brain, much like Pooh, the story from England, okay? I like 3 things. I can remember them. The 3 steps, many of us will recognize. Let's talk about then how this connects. Notice interpretive. Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me back. Notice that interpretive is at the bottom. It's at the base. It's at the foundation. Interpretive is as we were when we were first trying to survive. This is one reason why folks talk about comprehensible input. 'Tis true. But remember that it is about the whole experience of the culture as well as the language. And it's about being patient with sound, especially writing too. But interpretive is the basis. It also is the way that we organize, a way that we even approach life. Because what we're doing is when we wake up in the morning, we keep ourselves quiet for just a moment. And then the first thing we do is, I would suspect I'm not alone in this, pick up our phones or something else where we can engage in the interpretive experience, right? Then we begin to interact with others, which is connected to the belonging, my friends. Interpretive is survival. Then interpersonal is the belonging, and that's why it goes in that order. And only then do we present. Okay, this is the order in which life goes. So again, let's take a normal kind of a day, and this is what happens in the classroom too. One of the workshops that I like to give is that every day is an IPA. Every day is an integration of these. Every day we pick up a phone, and let's say that I look at something and I see a wonderful thing on my phone. I read or I listen to, say, a YouTube or something like that, that's a gorgeous thing about something beautiful that has happened in the world, something that's, say, supported young people or refugees. Okay, I read that. I look at the video that is associated with it. And then the first thing I do is I go find somebody to talk about with it. I go to my husband, I go to one of my children, and I talk about this. Look what I found. It's so beautiful. Let me share it with you. And then the person that's there looks at it with me and says, I love that. And here is what I saw about it too. Or I disagree with this. Doesn't always have to be always happy, right? The fact is that the first thing we do in life is we bring ourselves and our context, our life skill, right into receiving something, and then we want to share it because we belong. Language is about communication. Then we may have the opportunity to talk about that with some folks. We may stand in front of people and chat about it. Indeed, we may present it to them like, I read this, let me show you this. That may happen. It's important to have the aspects of that. And the fascinating idea is, it's interesting, Michelle writes down about the isolated communication modes. See, when they're integrated as an experience, read something short, listen to something short, experience something visual short, then think, what did I just experience? And then turn and talk about it with one other person, or maybe with two. What did you see? What did you smell? What did you hear? What did you just touch with your eyes closed? What did you read? What did you watch? Just short. If it's in context, we have something to share and be about. Then we can talk about, or draw about, or do a drama about. Remember, language is about the body, what we learned. But the first two, the receiving and the sharing, that's the key. So have hope with that. Look for that if you're a student. And if you're an instructor, spend time thinking, how can we spend 5 to 10 minutes, the best 5 to 10 minutes? You know, one of the things we do is we go very fast through a lot of things. Find something key, take a moment, make sure that's in the context. You can use the same tool in different contexts. Use the context of yourself or of the learner, and then move through. This is integrated. So these 3 steps are key, and that makes language real. All right. Now I have 3 language gifts, and I know that we're coming closer, especially with the time. The 3 gifts are, again, they're a very small brain. I've got 3: affirm, engage, and invite. These are critical for educators to give to students. They're critical for students to give to their peers. They're critical for folks to be able to take care of each other. And, you know, Sophie has just written about hesitating because of fear of missing up. See, what's nice about the language truths and about what I'm about to share with this affirmation is that messing up becomes part of the joy of creation, because the only thing that messes up, really, if we're paying attention to it, my friends, is when the communication doesn't happen. And you know what happens when communication doesn't happen? The person goes, could you repeat that? I don't understand. And we do it again. That's it. Now, here are these 3 parts, these gifts psychologically you can give to people. Here's what we do when we affirm, engage, and invite. I call them 3 principles. Affirmation comes like this. Let's say that, well, my personal experience was I was a brand new teacher. 3 people, 3 from the Department of Education came into my room, and I was talking the best I could because I was brand new and I was trying this and I was having fun. And at the end of the hour, we had my planning period, and the first thing they said was, "You spent so much time in the language." They affirmed that I was doing something good. I felt built up. It's like if you are working in your language in the classroom, that the first thing that your teacher coach does is say, "You know, you had an especially strong control of that word we were looking at yesterday." Doesn't have to be 10 vocabulary words, 3 verbs and a partridge in a pear tree. Just affirmation of something real, something concrete first. Then the next is to engage. Engage. Bring the learner in. What did you perceive that you did well? Do you see anything that you would feel might be improved? In the case of my story, they asked me then what I thought, and I described what I thought went well. And then they asked me, as part of engagement, that's number 2, how much language did your students speak? Oh my! It turned out not very much when I realized it in front of them. But they didn't hit me over the head with me. They engaged me in a conversation in which that point was brought out. Okay? And then you invite. You invite to go on to do the next thing, okay? To make sure that they invite to go to the next stage. It does not have to be a vast new thing, something that goes on to the next step. Much like if we were doing piano, we'd say, do a little bit more with, say, providing a little bit more nouns about this context next time. Let's give it a try. Let's try a new scenario. And remember that the scenario should be newish, should be part of a scaffold, a ladder up, and not just let's go repair what we got wrong. Okay? In these ways, one takes ownership of learning indeed. Context drives everything, as you are saying. Remembering that there's risk. The cameo that I made was about making a fool of myself, around the world, okay? And you see, I have survived to talk about it. So will you, if you are a learner. So will your students, if they are finding that they are messing up in a classroom. Because remember, first we have to survive, then we need to belong, then we can become competent. To be patient, to take time, to recognize that we're all co-creators of language. So those 4 truths, remember, language is sound is huge. That will help you, okay? And that we are talking about co-creating, inventing, taking risks. We're talking about interpersonal after the interpretive, and only then the presentational. And affirm folks, engage them, and invite them. These particular truths and gifts will bring great impact and joy, as I have experienced in my life. So how about that? What are some of the things that you would like to share now? You've been sharing some beautiful stuff here. It's been great to don't worry about making the mistakes. We do worry about making the mistakes, don't we? Because it's part of feeling like we're dying. And that's helpful to know for ourselves. It's helpful to know for teachers, okay? That we do feel as if we're dying. So don't be surprised on that. And that's my offering for today. Looking to see if I have any more on. I keep having trouble getting my cute little. There we go. I appreciate so much that you are here. I hope that per the opener that you will find that joy, that enthusiasm, and thank you so, so much for being here. Thank you for commenting to each other. That was wonderful to see, and have a great rest of this wonderful conference. I know I am planning on it. Take care now.